students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we'll continue with the series which we have started, that is the climatic region of the world, and we are going to describe today the desert type of climate. Now, this is very important climatic zone because almost one third of our Earth's surface or land surface is covered by the desert regions. So, first of all, to give you a brief introduction about desert type of climate, we can say that deserts are those regions which receive very little precipitation, whether it is in terms of liquid precipitation or whether it is in the solid precipitation. So very little precipitation, mainly we can say less than 50 centimeters per year in terms of average annual rainfall. And most of the time, because of such dry conditions due to low precipitation that exist in the desert areas, people use the adjectives such as hot climate, dry climate, and even empty climate, because obviously the vegetation density will be quite sparse in such low precipitation or low rainfall region. However, these three simple words do not tell the whole story about the deserts. We know that some deserts obviously are very hot natures, with daytime temperature going as high as 54 degrees Celsius, as you see in the Al Ajija desert of Libya, which also has the world record of having the highest temperature in any particular time. However, some deserts also are cold deserts. That means we should not just reduce all the deserts world into hot category. We also have cold deserts which are lying in the temperate regions somewhere in the middle of the continents, such as we know the Gobi Desert is there in the Mongolia and China. And some deserts remain cold throughout the year, such as we have Atacama Desert in South America. So most of deserts are not empty, especially in modern times. They are far from being empty and lifeless and are home to a variety of plants, a diverse number of animals, as well as the other organisms. And even you will see the human life existing in the desert areas, which have adapted themselves to survive in such harsh desert environments, such harsh desert climate. So due to this, thousands of years have passed since the people have been continuously living in the desert region. So first of all, let us try to understand that how can we classify deserts into various types or various categories. So on the basis of their location, deserts can be characterized as hot deserts, and since most of the hot deserts lie in the subtropical zones, these are also called as subtropical desert. To understand it more better, simply we can say that those deserts which are existing between 15 degree to 30 degree of latitude, both north and south, can be called as subtropical desert or hot desert. Similarly, some deserts are located in the middle latitudes and also situated in the interior of the continent. That means they are surrounded completely by a big landmass, and such deserts can be called as mid-latitude deserts. The example will be Gobi Desert and Taklamakan Desert, as we have discussed before. Then obviously we know that desert is not hot desert. Example, in the polar areas of the earth, whether it is in the Arctic region in the north or whether it is the Antarctic region in the south, it is also a region which is largely devoid of vegetation or plant cover, remains cold throughout the year, and most of the time temperature goes even below 0 degrees Celsius. Thus we can have Arctic and Antarctic desert. And some deserts form due to deficiency or lack of rainfall, which results due to their location with respect to the local mountain. For example, such deserts are called as rain shadow desert. To understand it more better, let us suppose that we have a mountain like this, and on this particular side, suppose you have a sea or ocean. Now, if the wind is coming from the sea and is striking this particular mountain, then on this side, what you will see, you'll see the forced ascent of the wind. And as the wind rises in this particular side of the mountain, the warm and moist wind that will undergo condensation, and the water vapor present in this warm and moist wind will finally come down in the form of rainfall. So this slope, which is also in geography referred as windward slope, basically receive huge amount of rainfall. On the other hand, once wind crosses the mountain, as it descends in the downward direction, what happens as it is coming in the downward direction, the temperature of wind start to go up. And as the temperature of wind start to go up, we see the warming effect, and thus there is no possibility of any condensation, no possibility of cloud formation, and thus there is a no possibility of rainfall. So in this particular side of mountain, which is called as leeward side, we have very little to no precipitation, and all the areas that is lying in this side of mountain is called as rain shadow region. So thus in this part of mountain you will see the arid or desert areas, and such deserts are called as rain shadow deserts. So four deserts we have discussed. To give you again example, if you look at the Sahara desert, the largest desert of the world, extending almost across the Northern Africa, it is the example of hot and subtropical desert. Then we have polar desert. As we can see here, we have Arctic in the north, and obviously in this side we'll have Antarctic in the south. These are the polar deserts. We have Gobi desert, that is example of mid-latitude deserts or interior deserts situated between Mongolia and China. And then we have the Death Valley desert in California, which is situated in the rain shadow region of Rocky Mountain, and thus there is a less rainfall, and thus we have a Death Valley in California, example of rain shadow desert. So four types of deserts, and there are four examples we have talked about. Now coming to the distribution of deserts in the world. So now if you look at the distribution of hot desert first, what we can see, we have the Sahara desert in the Africa, northern Africa. Then we have Arabian desert in the Arabian Peninsula. We have Thar desert in India. These are example of hot desert. Similarly, in the southern hemisphere, we have Kalahari desert in Africa. Then also in US, we have Sonoran, Mojave and Chihuahuan desert. And in Australia, we have several number of desert as we can see here. So these are example of the hot desert. Cold desert also we can see, for example, we have Gobi, Taklamakan, Karakum, Kizilkum. This is in the Central Asia, China and Mongolia. Then we have at Patagonian desert, example of the cold desert. Then we have the Namib desert, that is also example of the coastal desert, because here we have a cold current that flows through. So these are the coastal desert. Atacama desert can be characterized as a coastal desert on the basis of their location. So what is the main important point we have to remember here is, in terms of temperature, how can we classify the climate of a desert? So first of all, if we try to understand the temperature of the desert region, we can see that most of the hot desert species lies in the subtropical region, and it is in these areas we do not see any distinct cold season. Thus, we have no any cold season, and average temperature, especially during the summertime, remains somewhere about 30 degrees Celsius in this particular desert region. Similarly, if you look at in the desert area, what happens, since the moisture is very less, due to this cloud formation is very less. So we can say there is almost absence of the cloud. And since there is absence of cloud during the daytime, what happens? The desert surface becomes very hot due to the continuous intense isolation that it is receiving. While in the night time, due to the absence of cloud, the desert surface cools also at a very fast rate, at very rapid rate. And it is due to this region, in daytime temperature rises significantly, but at the night time temperature decreases very significantly, and thus the diurnal temperature range in desert area is very high, somewhere ranging between 14 degree to 25 degrees Celsius. That means in daytime, if temperature desert area is becoming 45 degrees Celsius, it is quite possible that by the night temperature can become 15 degree to 20 degree Celsius. That is something which is called a diurnal temperature range, that is T maximum of that particular day minus T minimum of that particular day. And since the temperature in some desert area even reduces to 0 degrees or below 0 degrees Celsius, we also see formation of frost, that is small ice particle that forms near the ground surface due to sudden condensation of the air. That is what give rise to frosty nights in the desert areas. So these are some points which we can keep in mind as far as the temperature of the desert is concerned. If you try to plot the desert temperature on a graph, we can see that in the month of January, February, March, desert temperature is slightly lower because obviously these are the winter months. And then as we reach the month of April, May, June, when we have strong summer month, temperature increases up to 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. And again from September onwards up to December, temperature reduces, but it does not go down below 15 degrees Celsius. So somewhere we can say 10 to 15 degrees Celsius to minimum, to 30 to 35 degrees Celsius in maximum can be the annual average temperature of desert type of climate in the northern hemisphere. Obviously, we know that in southern hemisphere, since season is reversed, the same situation will be reversed in the southern hemisphere. Now coming to the second most important characteristic, that is the precipitation. So as we have discussed, desert climate itself is characterized by very less amount of precipitation, and thus most of desert area world, if we calculate their annual average rainfall, it hardly goes above 25 centimeters. Now if we talk about relative humidity, which is a measure of the probability of rainfall, in the coastal part of desert, it can go as high as 60%, but as we move away from coast in the inland areas, RH reduces to almost 30%. To give you an idea about the importance of RH, rainfall can only happen if RH is more than 100%. That means if RH is more than 100%, we can say that air is super saturated. There is no more place for the air parcel to hold any extra amount of water vapor, and thus this extra water vapor will condense, will fall down in the form of rain. The driest desert in the world is considered to be the Atacama Desert, which is situated in South America, and it is situated on the coastal side. Due to the flow of Peruvian current, we have this desert-like formation that develop. And here in this part of desert, hardly you will find any time when rainfall, any year when rainfall is more than 2 centimeters. That is why it is called as driest part of the Atacama. Recently, there was a rainfall that has happened after a long period of time, and due to this sudden rainfall that happened in Atacama Desert, now you can see in this particular picture, we see a blooming of the flowers. Different flowers are suddenly bloomed up, and this is just one color, but the entire area has been covered by several different hues and colors of the flower. So what happens basically in desert areas, the seed of these flowers remain dormant if the dry condition persists, but once the rainfall happens, sudden rainfall happens, the seeds of this flower suddenly spring up at a very fast rate, and this gives a kind of flowery appearance, kind of valley of flower like appearance in this Atacama desert. Now, the most important questions that come to our mind, that what factors are responsible for formation of desert across the world. So, three major factors we can clearly identify here. The first is, especially if we talk about the hot desert or the subtropical desert, this is the region which lies in the high pressure belt. To understand this, let us look at the pressure belt diagram of the world. For example, if you look at the hot desert, we can see this is the distribution of hot desert. If we try to draw like this, and this zone is something that is lying between Tropic of Cancer and 30 to 35 degree north of latitude. So between Tropic of Cancer to 30 to 35 degree north of latitude is we have distribution of hot and subtropical desert. Now if you look at this particular altitude, you can see that in this zone we have a belt that develops, which is called as subtropical high pressure belt. Now we know that high pressure belt develop if there is a descent of air mass from the upper atmosphere to the ground surface, and this creates a high pressure. So obviously, as we know, that for the rainfall to happen, air have to move in the upward direction, and then only condensation happens, cloud formation happens, that causes rainfall. So in the subtropical high pressure belt, since air is sinking, air is descending in the downward direction, it obstructs the formation of cloud, and thus there is no rainfall in this situation. It creates actually a very clear cloudless kind of weather. So this is the first reason why desert areas have developed here, because there is no probability of rainfall due to high pressure conditions. The second reason what we can attribute to the formation of desert is the nature of wind that is blowing in this particular areas. So in the same zone where high pressure belt has developed, the nature of wind that you will find here are mostly offshore in nature. Offshore winds are those winds which are blowing away from the coast and toward the sea. Or in another way, we can say offshore winds are wind which are blowing from land to the sea. And these winds, which are also called as planetary or permanent winds, are trade winds that is blowing in this particular area. To again give you the same picture, if you look, this is our subtropical high pressure wind, this is the Tropic of Cancer, and if you look in this particular area, we have the northeasterly trade wind that is blowing in northern hemisphere and southeasterly trade wind that is blowing in the southern hemisphere. So we try to understand this on the map of this world. We can see that this is your desert area, and here the flow of the air is something like this. Movement of wind is something like this. That means the wind is moving from the land to the sea. So obviously, since wind here is moving from land to sea, they are devoid of any kind of moisture, because moisture wind can only pick up from the sea surface, water surface. Thus, these winds are dry wind and thus do not cause any kind of rainfall. Same thing exists, or same factor exists for these desert areas as well. So this is the reason why we have the, what we can say, lack of the rainfall and creation of desert in this particular zone. The third reason, obviously, the major factor that plays an important role here is the nature of ocean current. And in almost all the deserts that we have drawn here, if we try to understand the ocean current, the cold ocean currents are flowing along this particular coast. For example, in here the Sahara Desert, we have the cold Canary current that flows through. So if cold current is flowing in the coastal areas, we know that cold current will undergo less amount or less extent of evaporation, and due to this it creates a drying or desiccating effect in coastal areas, thus decreasing the actual amount of rainfall that is possible here. So cold Canary current produces less amount of rainfall here. On this side of USA, we have cold California current that flows through here, that also creates a drying or desiccating effect. On this side of South America, we have the cold Peruvian current, which is also called as Humboldt current after the name of the geographer who has first identified. So this is the cold Humboldt current that creates desert-like condition. Around Namib Kalahari Desert, we have the cold Benguela current that is flowing. So that creates again drying and desiccating condition here. If you look at the desert areas of Australia, here also we have a cold current that is called as West Australian current. So this West Australian current is also a cold current that created desert-like condition in this part of Australia. So now you can understand the combined effect of the pressure belt, the combined effect of the offshore nature of the trade winds, as well as the flow of cold current producing a drying effect can be considered as the main reason why between 15 to 30 degree north and south of latitude we have formation of hot or subtropical desert. Now, next point which I have talked about from the perspective of desert is the kind of vegetation that we find in desert areas. So obviously, since desert are the region where we have very less amount of rainfall, thus the vegetation have adapted themselves to this dry and arid condition, and such vegetations are called as xerophytic, where zero means dry, lack of water, and phytic means loving. That means such vegetation which are loving the dry condition, which grow in dry condition, can be called as xerophytic vegetation, which are the characteristic vegetation of the desert climate. So these are obviously the density of the xerophytic vegetation is very sparse, but in those areas of desert where you have water bodies, for example, if someplace rivers or river streams are flowing, or you have certain oases are developed, there you will find large number or high density of the characteristic of natural vegetation. The four important characteristics that natural vegetation of desert areas exhibit are, first of all, since the water table is very deep below the ground surface in the desert areas, the plants here have very long and deep roots so that they can suck up the water from very deep below the ground. Second characteristic is, then obviously it is a dry condition. That means the plants and trees have to conserve the water as much as possible, and thus they have thorns instead of leaf so that the rate of transpiration can be reduced. Similarly, many plant which has leaves also, the leaves are waxy or leathery in appearance because it reduces the rate of losses due to evaporation or evapotranspiration. Similarly, the stem part of the plant are very succulent or very thick in nature because it is used for storing or conserving water for the future uses if the dry condition is becoming more arid or becoming more drier in nature. So succulent or thick stem. And last, in many areas, as we have discussed in the case of Atacama Desert, the seeds of the plants, flowers and trees have very thick outer coating, so they can remain in the ground dormant for a very long period of time without having any kind of issues, without having any kind of decay. And suddenly when there is a sudden rainfall, these thick outer coating of seeds help it in surviving for a dormant period of time, and suddenly when there is rainfall, it springs up, creating a very what I can say is a large extent of vegetation in desert areas, because the rainfall in desert area, whenever it happens, is very short duration of rainfall, short burst of rainfall that happens, but rainfall is very intense in nature, and this helps these seeds to grow suddenly, spring up suddenly. So long roots, we have succulent storing water in the root and stems. We have seeds which has thick outer covering so that they can remain dormant for a long period of time. And all these are the major characteristic of the desert region. If we talk about the life in deserts, we can identify four different lifestyle that people have adapted themselves to for a long period of time in desert. One we can say are the primitive hunter and gatherer. For example, the Bushmen and Bindibus tribe, which are found in the Kalahari Desert of Africa. This you can see is example of the Bushman tribe. They are mainly hunter and gatherer. They depend on the hunting of the animals or gathering of the seeds, fruits, nuts, all those things for their survival. Second category of people who live in desert areas can be categorized as nomadic herdsmen, who depend on their animals such as sheep, goats, camel, and they keep on moving from one place to other place. They do not have any fixed habitat. They do not have any fixed settlement. That is why they are nomadic in nature. And the example of these herdsmen are Bedouins of Arabia as well as Mongols of Central Asia, and they mostly use camels for transportation because camels can move faster in desert. Third, we can also see that in those part of desert where you have river streams such as Nile River in Egypt or Tigris Euphrates River in the Mesopotamian, ancient Mesopotamia or modern day Iraq, we have settled cultivator who depend on the agriculture. They grow certain kind of crops, especially dryland crops such as millets, and all these kind of crops are grown here. And also many desert today have been has actually been discovered as a rich reserve of various important minerals such as diamond mines in the African deserts, copper mines in the South American deserts, and the silver mines in the Mexico desert. And not only that, in the recent time, the discovery of oil and natural gas also has happened in many desert area world, especially in the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula or the deserts of the Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and all these countries. And due to this, a lot of people have started to settle and live in the desert. These are called as mining settlers. because these settlement mainly have developed due to the availability of these mines. And the recent transformation, if you all of you must know about the cities such as Dubai, which is emerging as one of the most important metropolis of the world. So the main rise of the city of Dubai, mainly we can say it is due to the discovery of oil and natural gas in this desert area. So this is how the desert landscape is also continuously being transformed as the mankind is developing the technologies, developing the tools to harness such kind of minerals, harness such kind of resources which were not possible few years from few decades ago from now. So overall, what we can say that in the future also we will see the continuous transformation of desert landscape in our world. So that is all for this particular video. I hope you understood the concept of desert type of climate and its main characteristic. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with your fellow aspirants, and let's subscribe to our channel for more such content. Thank you very much.